Thank you so much for joining us on It's Time today. We are your hosts. I'm Lindsley Donnelly, your citizen scientist and your longevity expert for midlife women.
And I'm Dr. Jen Wagner, physician and holistic performance expert. Welcome to It's Time, powered by Prosper. Just a quick reminder, the information discussed in this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. We are not offering medical advice, nor are we entering into any type of physician or clinician relationship with listeners. Always consult your healthcare provider before beginning any new fitness, nutrition, or lifestyle changes to ensure they're right for you. Your health and safety is our priority, and let's keep it that way.
All right. It's time, community. We're so excited to be with you today. Dr. Jen and I are in the same town, in the same place, which is fantastic. And then we are so honored and excited to share our guest with you, Leslie Kinney, who is in the UK. So thank you for staying up with us. It's not that late, but it's your end of day for you. So thank you for spending time with us today. But we were so excited to bring Leslie on because she is a thought leader in the longevity space and in the whole thrival for the cohort of women that we think of as powering up for our high half. And she's leading across a couple of different vectors that we are just super excited to dive into. One is she started off the Oxford Longevity Project at Oxford, which is super cool, gathering thought leaders across that industry and space. And then secondly, she's pioneered an R&D project, which has resulted in a supplement company that has been tied to being able to help kind of thwart the impacts of aging and to some degree reverse it. So we're going to hear a little bit about that and the Spermidine brand. But with that summary introduction, I'd love, Leslie, if you could just talk with us a little bit and share with our audience kind of how you got into this work and what's up on deck as a priority for you right now.
Well, I got into this actually as a patient. So 21 years ago, at age 39, I was diagnosed with multiple autoimmune conditions. Rheumatoid arthritis was one. I could tell something was going on because I felt the pain in my hands. But lupus was another one, and it was completely unknown to me. Fortunately, while this is bad news, for me it was even worse news because I was right in the middle of my 5th round of IVF in Boulder, Colorado. And I was using donor eggs. And my first thought was, how does this impact my IVF round? And will I have children? I'd already gone through, 4 unsuccessful IVF rounds in the state of Colorado and had already heard my doctor say, you're infertile.
Yeah.
For me, that was just the ultimate, you have failed, your body and you have failed. So to hear that I had some autoimmune conditions was just, more kerosene on the fire. And when I heard from my doctor that there was really nothing that could be done about the lupus, there was no treatment, there was no prospective cure, I should expect it to get worse, I was really shocked. This was in 2004, so things have really changed since then.
Yeah.
I was prescribed a bunch of immunosuppressing injectables. And needless to say, my 5th round of IVF did not succeed. My doctor had told me I had around 5 years left. And so
that's staggering. To be told you have 5 years left at 39, what?
I had really pushed her. And I think in the UK, it's a little bit different because we have a single a sole payer system. So the NHS carries all the costs for healthcare here. But in the United States, we're healthcare consumers. And for me, as someone relatively young, my idea was I have a problem. I go to you, the medical expert, and you solve my problem just like you would fix my car. And so when she said, there's really nothing we can do, and you should expect it to get worse over time, I was like, wait a second, hang on here. I'm the client. You're the expert. I'm paying you. You have to solve this because I have this high stakes IVF round. You have no idea. I'm half Taiwanese, half Caucasian American. It's impossible to find donor eggs. This chance may never come again. And so I really did go at her. And I think that because I sort of, verbally pushed her against a wall, she was like, wait a second, if I'm going to be straight with you, I wouldn't do the IVF. You've got a good 5 years left. This is it. And that was really, that was such a shock to me. But it made me question the way that Brene Brown always says, you know, the thoughts that we put into our mind, are those thoughts really true? I did think, hang on, is this true that there's nothing I can do? Because it sort of only stands to reason that a patient who doesn't smoke, doesn't drink, and isn't stressed, or doesn't have, say, sleep deprivation, isn't working, terrible shifts or something, they ought to do better than a patient that does have those problems. So I really did begin to question what she thought and decided I would just make myself the best patient possible. And so I kind of looked to pick up wins wherever I could. And I started with diet because I'd read a book called the Anti-Aging Zone book. I don't know if anybody remembers Dr. Barry Sears. And that had just come out in 2005. And he said that autoimmune patients were victims of inflammaging. That was a term that Claudia Franceschi had just come up with a few years earlier. And we were prematurely aging ourselves, essentially, or our bodies were prematurely aging. So Sears recommended removing inflammatory foods or triggers in lifestyle and diet. And I took an allergen test, got rid of dairy, gluten, eggs. These were the triggers for me. And then I tried to optimize everything else. And I looked under every rock. I did trauma therapy. I did hikes in the Rockies, Mount Sanitas. I did yoga. I did meditation. I did healing visualizations based on the work of Professor Gerald Epstein at Columbia University. I was just down for everything.
Yeah.
And amazingly, when I went back in for a routine checkup, within about 6 months, my doctor, came into the clinic, into her office, and where I was already seated, and she opened her file and she just said, well, look at that. You don't have lupus or RA anymore. And I was sort of, what?
For 6 months? You have what?
Yeah, I was like, what? And, excuse me. And she said, all your labs have returned to normal. And I just thought, wow, that's amazing. Do you want to know what I did? Because one of the other things I did was an experimental treatment out of Germany called intravenous immunoglobulin. And she said, no, that's okay. And she didn't even look up for the file. She just closed it and, my appointment was over.
What?
And, I have friends who are doctors. Dr. Jen is a wonderful doctor. I mean, the reality is, number one, doctors are working within a system and they are often behind the gun on time, right? You look every morning, you've got like a huge list of patients that you have to consult with. And there will be many prescriptions you'll be writing. There will be many investigations you've got to instigate. There's a lot of work to do. And so this is not necessarily something where a doctor has copious amounts of time to investigate, to get curious. And I can imagine that there will be people who say, well, I went under a waterfall and I had this amazing crystal and the crystal, empowered me. So I don't know. I want to have compassion for our doctors because I know the constraints they're under. I know I can see the British Medical Journal here has said that if doctors did absolutely everything they were supposed to do in every day, they would need something like 26 hours a day to get it all done and to be up on the latest research. But I can tell you that the penny did drop for me that I had a role to play in my own healing. Yeah. And it also instigated a huge curiosity in me around the immune system and premature aging. So I have been on this journey essentially since 2004 and never thought anything about reversing biological age. All I wanted to do was optimize my health so that I didn't go back I wanted to stay in remission for as long as I could.
Yeah.
Surprise of surprises, at age 42, I fall pregnant naturally. Once they realized that my thyroid has also basically been destroyed by this autoimmune attack. Yeah. Didn't diagnose it earlier because, I didn't see an endocrinologist. I saw a rheumatologist, and people stay in their lane, right? So they diagnosed the lupus and the RA, but not the Hashimoto's. once that was fixed, and I take natural desiccated thyroid, within about 3 weeks, I fell pregnant. And my doctor predicted it. He said, your hormones are now going to be in perfect balance. You are going to be hyper fertile. If you are so tired, you cannot do any more, you can't chase after any more kids, then you should definitely take precautions, which really, really surprised me. I did not believe them at all. So in any event, fast forward another few years and I'm in Oxford, England. I've got one adopted daughter from China. I've got one biological daughter. I'm hanging out on this school playground waiting for my kids to, for the bell to ring and the kids to rush out. And I'm talking to other parents and they're doing amazing research. And it's through this kind of Oxford ecosystem of parents and learning about what they do that I am introduced eventually to two immunologists. And they're working on a crazy compound that we all make naturally when we're young in our tissues. We make it in our gut and we get it from plants that we eat. And it is rejuvenating elderly immune cells in their research. And it's got the craziest name. It's called Spermidine. So, and it is in semen, but it's also in copious quantities in breast milk. And it's also in the endosperm of all seeds to kind of help that seed, thrive in the wild, and started getting involved in that. But of course, Oxford being Oxford, it's a town of only 150,000 people. Lindsley, you've been here. You know how tiny it is. Yes. And, you end up meeting other people who are like-minded and interested in this idea of if we can rejuvenate the immune system, what else can we possibly rejuvenate? And what else can this compound do? But also, are there other compounds that can do interesting things? And what can we as patients do to improve our health? Because it's actually quite unfair to sort of show up when all the wheels have fallen off and say to a doctor, okay, fix me now that I'm broken.
Just the way most people do it.
Yeah. So I think that, it's great to know that we have agency and that we can be in partnership with our doctors. And that is something that the Oxford Longevity Project, which I have co-founded with some real public health policy heavyweights and scientists, that's really what we tried to start during COVID, because we could see so many people who just felt despondent. What can we do other than to wait for the government to come up with a solution? And for us, it was clear there was a lot that could be done. Even just walking or dancing at home or doing something joyful. There were some people who were, home with their families, and that could be used as a time to do things together as a family. But we wanted to give them options. And so we started with a symposia around a Nobel Prize winning science called autophagy, which is one of the benefits you get. It's cell renewal and recycling, and it's one of the benefits you get if you fast, but you can also activate it using certain compounds in food, one of which is spermidine. So we talked about that and had some of the scientists on. We had clinicians. We had actually a pediatric anesthesiologist from Miami who talked about this as well. And talked about some other compounds too. But yeah, that was essentially the genesis of the Oxford Longevity Project, and then Oxford Healthspan and the Primidine brand.
Yes. And then on the Primidine brand and a lot of the research you did, is my memories right in that a lot of it you kind of partnered with inventors and patented technologies out of Japan? Was that part of the R&D?
Yes. So we're very lucky in that we do have some great suppliers out of Japan. We started just looking at the work of the Nobel Prize winner for his work on autophagy, Yoshinori Osumi, who's based at Tokyo Tech, and one of his colleagues at the University of Osaka. But we also found these terrific suppliers of food-derived spermidine. So the issue with spermidine is that there's a synthetic version, a chemical version, and some animal experiments have been done with that. But there's a lot of epidemiological data that shows its benefit. And there are some clinical trials with wheat germ-derived spermidine, so food-derived spermidine. And we know, because it is in all plants, and we've co-evolved as beings with plants, we know that there's no downside to eating this. We just don't have any evidence that synthetic spermidine is safe for humans or actually works in humans. So that's why we wanted to find these suppliers of food-derived spermidine in Japan. And we have one that has a wheat germ-derived spermidine, and we've got another one in Okinawa that grows a unique strain of chlorella just for us, because we had to test a bunch of these different substrains of chlorella. And we found one that is uniquely high in spermidine. It weirdly has no iodine. Most chlorella does, but this one doesn't. And then we added in some Okinawan lime peel, which has another autophagy activating compound called nobilitin, a lot nicer sounding than spermidine. and then we used some Okinawan autumn turmeric. And autumn turmeric, because it's in the sun for a little bit longer, it has higher amounts of curcumin, so which is anti-inflammatory. In fact, spermidine, nobilitin, and curcumin are all anti-inflammatories. So we were, again, just very lucky to be able to find these suppliers and work with them to bring it to market. And we bring it to the US, Canada, the UK, and the EU, and then we, encapsulate it or bottle it in all of those territories.
Yeah. So with all of this experience in the longevity space, I feel like it is inundated these days, and there are some very loud people with very questionable suggestions, and there are some softer people with really, really good suggestions. And where do you see the biggest shifts happening? And how do you recommend that, having been in this space for so long, right? Having been in this space before it was trendy and cool and everyone was trying to be in this space, how do you help advise people who are just entering how to sift through what's noise, what's real? Because I feel, I see in my role today, I have guests and clients come in who are on, and I'm not exaggerating, 150, 200, 300 supplements.
Whoa.
And they're in multi-system organ damage. They're not failing yet, but livers are shot. Their kidneys are not doing well. And they're spending thousands of dollars a month on these supplements. And so it's like, because everyone says, do this, do this, do this. And no one says, well, just do this and don't do that. So it just becomes additive and you don't know what to stop doing. So how do you advise people who are maybe just entering this space or for any of us that are just hounded by all of these recommendations of all of these different things that are so targeted, right? That it's like, you can take this for X and then you need this for Y and you need this for Z, but you don't know how Z affects X, right? So it's like, what's your recommendation?
You have to work with a practitioner and you've got to test. So one great longevity vitamin is vitamin D. And I think people forget this, right? Omega-3s are great too, but do you need them? And depending on your age, your skin tone, how much time you spend outside, how much sunblock you use, we all have varying amounts that we synthesize in our skin. You don't know until you test. Some people are really going to need it and it's going to make a meaningful difference. Other people have enough. So unless you look under the hood, you don't know. It's just like, in this case, it is like taking your car to the garage. You would never think to take your car into the garage and say, okay, just do everything, right? You would run a diagnostic and you would see, okay, is tire pressure low? What's the engine oil like? Whatever. Yeah. And we have to do the same thing. And then we have someone who is medically literate or lab literate who can then look at the blood test results and say, okay, I can see that you are too high in B6 or B12. Actually, I see this a lot in people who say, oh, I'm getting this tingling in my legs and I'm not sure what it is. And the first thing I think of is, are you taking too much B6 or B12? you can have a deficiency, but you can equally have too much, and then you can actually do some damage, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I love that. And Dr. Jen and I are huge advocates of testing and data and iterations. And I
Yeah.
think if you're lucky enough to get to the Canyon Ranch, it's done, right? Because they do the testing and then they can help, fine tune the dials. But if you're kind of at your home, some of the US doctors at least, and I think it's changing the last 2 years to be fair, because there's been so much conversation about it, but some of the US doctors are just giving kind of the minimum biomarker blood tests for the
Mm,
annual physical. And then
yeah.
the sample size that you're compared to is your zip code, which may or may not be a healthy sample set. Depends on,
Yeah.
if you live in Park City or you live somewhere where it's a different mix. So
Yeah.
are there platforms? I mean, I've experimented with Inside Tracker, with Function Health, but are there other platforms that you would suggest to midlife women to do that testing?
Those two are both good ones. I have always worked with a functional medicine practitioner here
Okay.
in the UK. So she's based in London and Geneva, and she's a French trained endocrinologist. I really need an endocrinologist for my thyroid.
Yeah.
And she, having been board certified in both general practice and endocrinology, she's got those basics down, but she's been trained in functional medicine as well. So she is willing to do those extra tests. She will check my glutathione levels, for instance, which is
Yeah.
not necessarily something your average doctor would do. She's not going for thyroid. She's not just going to do, say, T4 and TSH, but she will look at my T3 levels, my reverse T3 levels. So
Yeah.
to be optimal, you really need to find somebody who's going to do, a comprehensive battery of you and a battery of test for you. And I always say to women who say, "Oh, it's so much money," I always say, "But you're spending this money on, look at what you're wearing, right?
Yeah.
You have the cost of multiple medical tests on your person, right? You're
Yeah.
spending lots of money on these, on clothes, but this is something we wear our health."
Yeah.
And people are always saying, I've saved it. They say to me, I've got this great pension. I'm all set up, but I have no energy. I'm fatigued. I'm breathless. I can't spend time with my grandkids. They wear me out. Health is wealth, right? And you
Yeah.
do have to actively invest, just like you would with your pension, in this.
Yeah.
I want to highlight something that you just said that I think is really important, and is that you have found kind of the unique needle in the haystack provider for your needs. And I think that's really important, right? Because I think that I think, especially in the US, as things gets more and more divisive, we say that's not, we look at, well, I just want to have XYZ. I want everything natural. I don't want a pharmaceutical. I don't want this. I don't want that. Or I want everything the other way. And finding people in the middle that are willing to use maybe a more traditional allopathic medical training and combine that with an open mindset to look at problems from multiple directions and find solutions that meet the need without ignoring the fact that there are some really physiologic issues, right? It's like that you have a problem with your thyroid, and that is really important to be addressed because that's what's keeping, by helping to correct that through multiple channels, it's keeping the rest of your hormones balanced, right? And it keeps everything else in line. And so I think that to me, especially sitting in the chair I sit in now, is so important that I want people to understand that there's such synergy that we can do, and it doesn't have to be one or the other. And so I just love your science-backed kind of approach to this and recommendation. And it does take time. Those people are really hard to find. It's not easy to do, right? It's not easy to find people. And it's really easy for people to kind of hang a certain shingle next to them and say, oh, this is what I do. So I think I just wanted to double down on that point, that I think that is really important, what you're saying, to have a person there to guide you, to have a clinician there to help you. And also the fact of over supplementation. I feel like, especially in the US, bigger, better more is better than anything. I grew up in a household.
Yeah,
I
I
think my
get
mom
this
used
a
to
lot. People asking me, isn't more better? Actually, no, there is a Goldilocks zone,
right?
right? And this is what you want when you do those blood tests. You're not looking to have, tons of iron. You want to have just the right amount of iron.
Right.
Everything has to be just right. And so that's again why I always caution people, especially with these multivitamins. I see
Right.
sometimes like 4,000% the amount of the RDA for B6 or B12. And I think, I don't know that this person needs this. This is a lot.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I used to laugh. I grew up in a house that more was better. And my mom used to have these horrible nosebleeds. I'm like, Mom, why are you getting these nosebleeds? Well, she was taking like, if a baby aspirin was good, then 2 full strength aspirin were better. And I was like,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna have a stomach left to go back to.
Yeah.
So no, I appreciate you saying that because I do think that those kind of parameters, I think, are often lost in what we see on social media and what we read is that, add this in. And we never talk about the super physiologic problems that can happen. Like our bodies are smart and our bodies, regulate things for a reason. And so, at a minimum, you're wasting money because your body's just getting rid of it. At the other end of the spectrum, you can cause real damage by
Yeah.
just thinking you need to hyperdose all of these different substances.
Yeah. So there is this problem which you'll know about called polypharmacy. And we don't know what the effect of taking statins together with metformin, together with who knows what else you're on, maybe rapamycin if you've had an organ transplant. What is the result? But equally, there's polypharmacy with supplementation, right?
Yes.
I have that conversation with friends all the time. And I do kind of laugh. I said, I'm a big fan of appropriate supplementation as I am a big fan of appropriate pharmacological use,
Yeah.
and there is a balance there. And I agree with everything that you're saying. But I was sitting with a friend the other day and I was laughing. I said, you showed me your labs and I gave you my medical opinion. Take it or leave it. I'm not your doctor. You just wanted my opinion. I gave it to you. But I could tell you to go outside and pick that dandelion in the parking lot and put it in your mouth and eat it. And you would do that over the other advice I gave you because it seems natural. And I was like, and I don't know what's in that. It could be poisonous. That could be a poisonous plant I'm pointing at.
Could be full of lead from,
Right? And so I think it is so interesting, this kind of preset mindset that so many people are developing because of all the noise in this area, that they're willing to be poly supplement users without insight. And I agree with you. It's frightening. And so I, again, just want to highlight all of the wonderful things that you're saying about testing and knowing and targeting supplementation and also knowing when things are too high. So thank you for being a voice.
For sure.
Leslie, one of the things I was kind of thinking about, because when we met for the first time, it was like 3 years ago, which it's hard to believe. But I remember when we were talking, it was like the idea of get enough protein, eat your creatine, sleep well, get outside, lift heavy was like cutting edge. It was like hormone therapy. It was like brand new ideas. And I know they've been out there forever, but it was getting such kind of this like a renaissance of like, oh yeah, that's what we got to do. And everybody got really focused on that. And I now think like right now it's common sense. If you talk to most women between 45 and 65, they know they need to lift heavy. They need to sleep well. They need to eat protein and, they know that. But what I'm wondering is like, what is cutting edge? What are we hearing about right now? That's like, make sure, is it red light therapy or, what are you coming across in the circles where you're hearing about things that might be worth researching or understanding better for women in this kind of cohort?
Well, first and foremost is the benefits that you get if you take HRT, bioidentical HRT. And I know this might be controversial or unwelcome, especially for listeners in the US, where only 4% of women eligible are taking it. But we have to remember that around 80% of all perimenopausal and menopausal women report symptoms. And the symptoms can range from sleep disrupting hot flashes to brain fog to mood to, just general fatigue or even pain. A lot of people start getting rheumatoid arthritis, osteoarthritis. They get this pain. There is evidence that HRT can be beneficial here. In addition, there is evidence that it can protect against some cardiovascular issues and it can protect against dementia, not to mention bone weakening, osteoporosis.
Yes.
And in the cost around 120 pounds a year for the government to pay for a woman to be on HRT. That's, let's call it 180 US dollars. And yet we have 14% uptake in the UK. It is better than in the US, but it is still, given that 80% of women say they've got a problem, that is,
It's so low for both. I mean, it just seems so low for both regions because we hear about it all the time. It's all over social media as hormone
I think
therapy.
it may be all over our social media.
Right.
And,
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. I think that in particular, when they've done the studies, they can see that the women who really don't have education around it or have easy access to it tend to be those who come from more challenging backgrounds, to be honest. But, Japan has a 15% uptake rate. And yet when I mention this to people, they're like, well, I thought they just ate a lot of tofu. Yes, tofu and plants make up a lot of their diet. They do walk a lot, but even they have 15% uptake. What does that say? And so I am a big advocate for women to feel empowered to speak to their practitioner about whether or not HRT would be helpful. And honestly, there are individuals who say that the reason the divorce rate is so high at this time is because mood and libido changes, right? That happen. And so that's just another reason for women to investigate whether or not this is appropriate for them. And unlike Dr. Jen, a lot of doctors don't get much education around menopause.
I didn't get any. It is changing in real time now, but there's a whole generation, my generation of physicians that not only did we not get any education, we were told and taught it was dangerous, right? And so it's like, why are we going to educate them why are we going to do this deep dive into stuff that we have labeled as really dangerous? And so I think that, that problem is twofold. I had this example the other day that I also think there is what women are willing to support in a group setting or in public becomes a very different one-on-one conversation with a provider. And I see this time and time again that women are like, I want to start taking hormones and blah, blah, blah. But there is this ingrained fear in them that is real. The fear is real. The fear is real based on inappropriate interpretation of data. So, and when it comes time to actually taking that prescription to the pharmacy and getting it filled and putting those hormones in their bodies, the fear takes over. And so it's this very interesting thing. They want it. They're asking for it, but we still haven't even gotten over that last hurdle of, I feel confident in this choice, And so it's really challenging. And then to your point, to find enough practitioners that are, as much as we empower women to go have these conversations, which I agree with you 100%, every woman should feel empowered to go and have the conversation. That doesn't mean hormones are right for and I'm a huge hormone supporter. Doesn't mean they're right for every single individual, but you should be able to have the conversation just as be able to have the conversation about any of the other parts of your healthcare. But I think, this rise and hopefully the rise in the US and the available of some telehealth companies that are really supportive of hormones. And, I laugh. I'm going to be on the Live Long Stage Women's Summit next week with a lot of the advocates for hormones in the United States. And I'm excited, and it's exciting to be there. But I think, Leslie, your point is very valid that we see it a lot. Like our Instagram feeds are full of this heavy lifting, protein, hormones. But the gap in knowledge to the general public is still, I'm astonished every time how bad it is and how many people don't know.
It takes, sorry, go on, Lindsay.
No, I was just to say, because I think the nuance on hormone therapy too, that I think is getting more of the awareness is a lot of women, if they're 55 or 60, they think they missed the window. It's like, no, you didn't. You can definitely go back to the well. And so that is a new message to underscore for women. And then the second one, which I think is still kind of getting awareness, is testosterone is a hormone you can take. It's not just estrogen and progesterone. And in the US, the FDA still hasn't approved testosterone. And so you have to find a practitioner who's willing to work with that kind of process and really advocate for yourself for it.
Yeah, that's very true. And I think also the dosing matters because different women will absorb things like estradiol differently. Some women do fine on the patches or the gels. Other women just don't absorb it very well. So then they might need to go down the oral route. So just because the first attempt at this didn't work, don't think that this isn't for you. It's a collaboration with your practitioner, a partnership, and figure it out together, work together to see what works. And maybe you need testosterone, maybe you need less, maybe you only want testosterone, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe you just want to deal with bladder incontinence and or vaginal dryness. Therefore, you just need the vaginal estradiol pessaries. There are just so many flavors of HRT that you do need to spend the time to educate yourself, look at the full menu with your practitioner and figure out what is right for you. But it will take some trial and error.
And I also think that's important to highlight. The earlier you start it, the more trial and error there's going to be, I think all of the data is showing us that the earlier we can start some of these therapies in perimenopause, especially for the cardiovascular and the dementia benefits, is probably better, right? I mean, it's better for bones and everything else as well, but really we're seeing that for cardiovascular disease. But it is, I mean, and I will say this personally, I was sometimes still having cycles, sometimes not. I could tell when my estrogen was too high. I would get breast tenderness and get some of these side effects. And so I think it is also important for women to learn to connect the dots a little bit, because I could tell. And it's funny, my labs even showed it once. I went in and saw my provider and I said, my estrogen is going to be off the charts. I'm like, I think I had a cycle this last month. I've cut back because I take oral estrogen because of my cardiovascular profile. And yeah, he was like, it's off the charts. I'm like, yeah, I know. I had symptoms. I'm lucky that I can understand how to do this for myself. But it is trial and error. And it's trial and error for those of us who are very savvy in this space. And it's maybe even more trial and error for those that are just entering this space that may not have that knowledge base. And so it is a relationship. And there are so many different combinations that we can offer. It just does take a little bit of patience and based on your symptoms. And I think the other important thing with this that we've learned that some of these, what we just thought for a long time were symptoms that degraded our quality of life in the short term, actually have really long-term health consequences. And so when we look at hot flashes is kind of the canary in the coal mine, right? It's kind of saying you're setting yourself up for a higher risk of stroke, a higher risk for heart attack, all of these things. And so it's almost really important to treat those independently because of the long-term health consequences that they are showing you an early warning sign of.
Well, we treat high blood pressure, right? The doctor diagnoses it. We might not be aware of it, and we get medications for that. So why not get something for this? Back to your point about people saying they want all natural or they want to go completely pharmaceutical. My philosophy has always been, I want to be able to access all the tools in the toolkit. And when it comes to these bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, we were never meant to live as long as we are living today. It was rare for a woman to be 61 like me and thinking, I want to go out to a rave, right? That just didn't happen. And because I would have been dead, we have to just face up to the fact that we are deficient. For me, hormone deficiency is just like a vitamin D deficiency. I need to top up. I don't want to take too much, but I don't want to have too little. Again, that Goldilocks zone, and working with great practitioners like you, Dr. Jen, means that you can figure out what you are deficient in.
Well, I love this conversation, and I want to make sure that we give a second for our community to hear what's happening now with the Oxford Longevity Project, if there's anything coming up this summer or anything you want to make sure people are aware of, and then what's happening with the Oxford Health Span with Primidine, if there's either a new form factor or a new product on the horizon or anything else you want to make sure that our community knows about.
Sure. Okay. Well, on the Oxford Longevity Project, we've got our annual Smart Aging Summit taking place on the 9th of May at Rhodes House. the global home to the Rhodes Scholars at the University of Oxford. And we are focusing on diet this year. So we have a professor from University College London and a BBC broadcaster, Dr. Chris Van Tulken, who wrote the New York Times bestselling book, Ultra Processed People. So he'll be talking about ultra processed foods and how that impacts our health. We have a Michelin chef. He's had a Michelin star for over 20 years, who was diagnosed with cancer, talking about his journey, how he views food now post-cancer diagnosis. We have Dr. Nick Norwitz, who's a fantastic doctor, just finished at Harvard Med School, but had done his PhD in ketones at the University of Oxford. And he'll be speaking on ketones. We've got Bill Tara, who started the Macrobiotic Institute with Michio Kushi many, many years ago in Boston. He and his wife, Marlene Watson Tara, will both be speaking about those who want to try a vegan diet or a vegetarian diet, and they'll be talking all about plants. And we've also got a breakthrough biotech panel where we've got a couple of companies coming out of stealth. So we're really excited to see these companies that are really looking at targeting the diseases of aging by targeting aging itself. And so they'll be there as well. And we've always got a lot of movement and dancing and breath work. You know, it's not just every hour we break to move around or to do something or to talk with other people around us, because we're not one of those conferences where you just sit there. Tickets are still on sale. If you go to oxfordlongevityproject.org, you can see those and make a nice weekend of it in Oxford in spring, which is absolutely beautiful. On the Oxford Healthspan front, we were very honored to have won. Well, we were one of about 20 or maybe 15 companies that were singled out as having most innovative product and the Natural Food Expo, which is unusual. I mean, yes, we are a food supplement, but I've never thought Natural Food Industry Group would give us a little award. So we were very happy about that. That was for a gluten-free spermidine. And we are bringing that out as a powder. So we are available in the Los Angeles area at all the Erewhon shops. Nice. And yeah, actually, and Bill Tara was one of the early board members of Erewhon many, many years ago. But yeah, so we're available there. And we thought, gosh, those smoothies, everybody's doing smoothies at Erewhon. Well, you know, we should bring this up because people have pill fatigue. And we kind of want to underscore the fact that our powders are actually a food. So it's a little bit different than just having some, you know, synthetic chemical that you're pouring in. And so we've brought that out and are quite excited about it. But yeah, awesome. Always I tell people, start with the foundations, you know, movement, good sleep, good food, right? Don't forget those. Don't think you can supplement your way out of doing those things. And then the supplements are the icing on the cake. And the icing is as advised by your practitioner who has deemed that you were too low.
I love that. I use that all the time with people. I was like, if you just put icing on nothing, there's still nothing underneath it. Right?
Exactly.
I use that. I use that framework every day.
Huge
supporter of that.
Yeah. Well, we'll make sure we're linked in our show notes to all of it so people can find, you know, the Oxford Longevity Project and Spermidine. But I also want them to link to the article, because we didn't talk about this, about your chronological age being like 28. You know, we talked about this before we started.
21, but yes,
21.
Who will quibble over 7 years?
That's amazing. So I want to make sure people have a chance to read about that too. But.
Sure, yes.
Awesome.
So for anyone who's listening who is a patient and who is a bit despondent about it, you know, I'm living proof of what you can do, because I've been in remission for 20 years, but I never thought I would get crazy biological age like that.
Yeah, reversals like that.
Yeah.
One tactical question is: are you going to have a recording version that you sell of the Oxford Longevity Project? Is there like a after pass?
We
get over the UK?
We haven't done that in the past, and I don't. You know, if we're technologically set up to do it this year, I'll have to talk to our program director and see if she's up to it. Yes, I will let you know. I will let you know. Yeah.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it was a pleasure.
Thank you so much for spending your time with us here today. If you liked what you heard and you got some tips on how to live better right now and for the long haul, please help us reach more midlife women. Please share and rate and like this show. And we can't wait to continue the dialogue with you on our next episode. Until then, thank you. It's time.